Dan is going to show us a short clip featuring one of our campers from the 2020 Met Opera Global Summer Camp. Dan, can we hear from Valeria, please?
Hi, my name is Valeria. I'm Venezuelan and I live in Buenos Aires, Argentina. What I love about Lucia di Lammermoor is that it's a perfect example of bel canto, because the beauty of human voice prevails over the orchestra. You can listen to it, for example, in Act 1, when Lucia sings Renava nel silencio. That's one of my favorite arias. Also, the libretto is really interesting because Lucia and Edgardo's dramatic love story that keeps you attentive during all the opera. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Valeria. And now I'm so pleased to bring back Dr. Emily Sáenz for more curriculum. Dr. Emily Sáenz, reveal yourself.
Oh, so glad to be back with you. This has just been such a pleasure today. And I feel like the two previous interviews just led right into our activity that we're going to talk about.
Take it away.
Thank you so much, Susan. I feel very strongly that we artists, we teachers are empathy makers. We are the guides that are leading children to develop this skill and muscle of empathy. And so to me, Lucia di Lammermoor is the perfect vehicle to use for that. Especially now when we cannot be connected in person, teaching empathy is even more important because it's really hard to sense how other people are feeling and thinking across the screen. And so I'm making my classroom a very intentional space for developing that skill for my students, believing deeply and trusting that at the end of this, it will make them better musicians. It'll make them better teammates. It'll make them better humans. And I find that there is no greater vehicle than opera to teach that. So we are going to jump into Lucia. Anytime that I am teaching something that's got an element of the gruesome, I always lead with the gruesome. So if I'm going to teach about Schumann, I'm going to start with images of the syphilitic brain and what it does to deteriorate that brain. And we're going to go from there. And so with Lucia, I jump right in with the gruesomeness of the tale. I want to read you a little quote quickly. This is from Amy Herman, who we heard speak at the Met Conference a couple of years ago. My book is really beat up because I have enjoyed it so thoroughly. And her work in this book and at that conference really inspired the lesson that I'm teaching today. She says, empathy is a vital competency for collaboration, for managing conflict, and for creative thinking. Hallelujah. Say it again for the people in the back. It's just everything that we've been talking about today. So that's beautiful how that worked out. All right, on to Lucia and her blood-stained dress. Let me share my screen with you. Here we are. All right. So again, this slideshow is available to you in the Google Classroom. It's ready to go. The links are working, and I hope that you'll find some purpose for it in your own classroom. So the first thing that we're going to do, taking a page from Amy Herman's book, is just sit down together with this image and talk about what we see. What do we see? What do we see in the set, in the expressions, in the costuming? There are some beautiful, beautiful things happening in the faces of the chorus members behind here that I would hope that the children see and address. When we talk about opera, we always have to reference the dual world of the actor and also the character. And so when we're looking at a scene like this, I like to make sure we're talking about, what's happening on stage. What do we think is going on with the lady in what is obviously a wedding dress, but also how tight is that dress? Is it hard for her to breathe in it? What does it feel like to wear a costume that has blood on it? Is there another version of this costume that doesn't have blood on it that she was wearing earlier that maybe she changed into this one? And what was that like for the costumer to design the costume twice? What is it like for the people standing behind her? What do they see from their perspective? So we want to dive really fully into the image and see if we can come up with some good ideas. In my experience with the students, they get right away that it's a wedding dress. Right away, they see the blood and want to talk about it. So you have to push them a little further to look at what's behind and include that in the conversation. Let's look at another image here. Now that we can see the side of the dress, how does it change our perspective? Look at the faces of the people standing near her. This beautiful woman in general, I mean, right here, right next to her, her face almost has disgust on it, disdain. Let's talk about that. Why is her character feeling that? Why do we think she as an actress came to show that on her face? My students brought up some really, really incredible points here about the blood staining. So I want to talk about that just a little bit. Let's look at the dress with our kind of CSI minds on it. Okay. So when we're looking at the blood splattering, how close do we think she was to the person that was injured? Do we think she injured them? One of my students pointed out so intelligently, a 9th grade girl, the blood on the hem of her dress makes me think that she stood in the blood for a while. So what does that look like? Did she knock the person down and then stand in their blood? Did someone else knock them down? So there's lots to talk about here. And all of that is intentional. Everything that you're seeing on the stage is intentional. I have found so much comfort in teaching the opera during a time when so many things around us don't make sense. So much in our world right now seems unintentional. It seems haphazard, and that's really scary to us as humans, and it's very terrifying to students. And when we watch the opera, particularly from a company like the Met that does these incredible, meticulous productions, everything that you see is intentional. And there's so much comfort in that. The person who designed this dress, the person who painted on the blood, did it with direct details in mind. And so we can mine for those, and we can take a lot of pleasure in knowing that everything we look at here has meaning, and we can talk about that. Finally, this is the final picture that I showed them for them to talk about. Susan Blackwell has us do something at the Met conference that I use all the time in my classroom now, which is where we take a moment to find stillness in our bodies. We breathe deeply. And then we say where we are holding a certain feeling in our bodies and how it feels. I feel nervous, and for some reason, my hands are a little bit cold. We share out how that's manifesting. So one thing that we did with this image first is to talk a little bit about it. We can see that she's got blood on her face here. How does that change our perspective of her character? What does that feel like as an actress? Is it her fingerprint? Is it Natalie Dessay's fingerprint that made the blood on her face? Or is that someone who did her makeup? Is that their handprint? And what did that feel like to her before she went on stage to get blood put on her? The other thing that you could point out here is that in this picture, she's not wearing gloves. In the other two previous shots, she is wearing gloves and they're bloodstained. What that means to me as an artist is that this picture is taken from a dress rehearsal, and someone sitting out in the audience, one of the makeup and costume people who are there watching the dress rehearsal, said, "I don't see enough contrast of blood on her hands. Let's get some gloves on her." And then they put gloves on her, and that's what she's wearing in the production we're actually going to watch. So cool things to talk about the acting experience and also about the character. The next thing that I do here to tie into Susan, well, there's Susan there, I see her face, is that we put our bodies in this position. So I have them stand and I have them move their bodies into this kind of contorted pose that we see Natalie Dessay in here. And then we take a moment and breathe into this feeling. And we say, what does it feel like in her body in this moment? What does Lucia's madness feel like in her body in this position? Now let's sing. What does it feel like to sing with your body contorted this way? And that helps us just live into the experience of Lucia's madness. And this is all before we've talked about plot, but all before we've heard any music. So we've just jumped right in here with the gruesomeness. So after we talk about the blood on her, now we're going to change completely. We shut off the lights and we listen to the mad scene and allow the darkness and the eye closing, because we love a good eye closing, to affect the way that we hear the music. I've linked for you here a performance of Diana Damarau singing this scene. I adore the way that she sings it. It's great just to listen to. Then later on, you can go back and watch it. It's an orchestral rehearsal, so she's not in costume, which I also love. These are things that I've listed for you here to talk about. Who is singing? What kind of instruments are we hearing? What do we think's going on? Describe the vocal line to me. What do you think she's saying? And we heard earlier, we were talking about how the music does not sound mad. It sounds lyrical and lovely. When a person is mad, when they're experiencing their own madness, do we think that the thoughts in their brains move quickly or slowly, or some combination of that? And how did Donizetti create music that reflected that? At this point in the discussion is when I like to bring in and talk a little bit about Donizetti's life. He did spend some time in a mental institution. So was he writing the madness in himself that he was already beginning to feel here? Or was he just a highly empathic person who wrote a beautiful scene of madness that we can connect with? Lots of things to talk about. And the kids now at this point are already really feeling it. My students begged for this opera. They begged for more discussion on it. This opera and Porgy and Bess are the two that I have taught that they just became obsessed with. And they really bought in here. So this went really well. The other thing that we're teaching here by teaching, looking at an image and really breathing into it and feeling it, is how to read the room. And this is a skill that so many adults don't have. And we have to teach it to many of our humans and help them learn to read the room. These are skills that are real life skills, that are fine art skills. Okay, so now we're going to jump into legends. There are two legends that really, really affect Lucia here, the storytelling in Lucia and the way that we perceive it as listeners. So we're going to first define what a legend is. And for me, defining words is not something I do often in my choral music classroom. So it makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I like to lean into the discomfort. So let's define words and discuss what they mean. And then we're going to dive in to what are the purpose of legends and myths? What scenario might they be told? What does it say about our culture, about the culture of the myth that they come from, and how do they affect the stories that are being told? So let's first talk very briefly about the legend of Janet Dalrymple. So this is the story that Sir Walter Scott used to influence the way that he told the story of Lucy Ashton in The Bride of Lammermore. We've already seen this painting once today, but now that we have a practice set up for our students of examining something and talking about just the facts of what we see and then interpreting it, we're going to repeat that process here. Let's look at this painting together, The Bride of Lammermore by John Everett Millay. What is going on with her face? What is their relationship? What kind of fabric is on her costume? Is it cold outside? How does he feel? So we can teach empathy here. We can also mine for details about the story that we're going to look into. Janet Dalrymple, who is the basis of this legend that Sir Walter Scott used to influence his Bride of Lammermoor, was a real person. She lived. And so we can find some pictures of her home, which we will see here in just a second. We can read the story of her life. This is taken from the introduction of The Bride of Lammermoor, which talks a little bit about how she fell in love with someone. She wasn't allowed to marry him. It ended in a gruesome stabbing on her wedding night when she was forced to marry someone else. Many of the stories of this legend report that Lucy Ashton was married to someone. She was cold as ice at the wedding. She didn't say much. They went upstairs to celebrate their nuptial bed. There was screaming. And when someone went up to the wedding chambers, they could not find her, only to discover that she was in the corner of the fireplace, covered in blood, shaking and ashen. And she only says one sentence, which is, "Did you take up your bridegroom? Did you take up your bonny bridegroom?" And they carry her out, and she dies just a month after her wedding day, from her madness. In that particular story, in that legend of Janet Dalrymple, the man that she marries does not die. He's just stabbed, casual. So there's one story that we look at, and here is the drawing now that of Lucy Ashton, which is based on Janet Dalrymple from the text, from the original text. And included there, Sir Walter Scott had included the line from Romeo and Juliet, "Is she a Capulet? Oh, dear account, my life is my foe's debt." So by the way, this is going to tie in really, really easily to Romeo and Juliet, which we'll be talking about next weekend. So now we can do the same thing, repeat the same process, and talk about this painting here, this drawing here. What do we see? What does it mean? And that will lead us into the Ravenswood fountain legend. So this is a legend within an opera. This is the legend of the fountain, which Lucia speaks of in her first act aria. And at this fountain, a young girl was murdered for love of another man. And here is the legend of that taken from the book. And then here is the text from the opera. Now we see another image here of Nathalie Dessay standing by that fountain, and we can discuss that one. All right, really quickly, I just want to move in here. This is the Baldun castle ruins, by the way. This is the castle where Janet Dalrymple murdered her, or stabbed her husband on her wedding night. So you can see it's a real place. Looks like you can tour it, which is cool. So then I opened it up to my students. So now at this point, we've connected with the characters and the music, and we've told the stories of the legends, and we've walked through the plot at this point. And now I've said to them, let's create together. Let's be empathic, and let's make something beautiful. You can make it anything you want. Poetry, story, dance, design, drawing, or painting. You can see here an incredible structure here that was built by Peter Corlett, and this is his interpretation of Dame Joan Sutherland performing the mad scene. So we talk about this, and then I just let them do what they wanted. So I just want to show you some of their work. These are two of my gals who are virtual only. I haven't seen them since March. Here's Samantha, and she dove into the legend of sirens and sirens throughout literature. She loves makeup. She created a makeup look for it, and I love it. Here's Ava as Bloody Mary. She was really interested in that story. And so I encourage some students to create their own legends, and some to just find legends that they were inspired by. And so both of them picked ones that they were inspired by. I love these looks. I love the creativity. They did it all on their own in under an hour, which is also really incredible. Here's a drawing by one of my students in my music theory class. She is really an artist, but she just takes music theory and really dove into this. This is Manana Nagal. That's really hard for me to say, but she is a very famous legend. She detaches her torso from her legs, and she sucks out the blood of pregnant women. Fascinating story. And she talked to us a little bit through that as she drew. She did this in one class period for us. This is a legend that a student created. She wrote her own legend, sent it in to me via email, and I really, really enjoyed it. She made it personal about her own life, but she added some elements of mystery to it, so that was really cool. And finally, my fellas singing. Now listen well as I tell of a night I shook with fear. We were sailing west on the open sea, heading home from a long, long year. I was standing watch all alone that night when I heard a wailing cry. As I strained to see what the sound could be, something flashed and caught my eye. And the cold wind blew. Aren't they adorable? So they were really inspired by sea shanties, and how many sea shanties, which are very popular on TikTok right now for some reason, have a lot of legends in them, myths about ghost ships, sailors that die and come back to life, and now they're going to take over the ship. And so they learned a little shanty. I unleashed them on the closet of costumes. They put this together in one afternoon, and they're so charming. And now they have something that they're interested in that ties to Lucia. Here are some video resources that I have for you here. The Met Opera behind the scenes there is really great. It's an interview. Renee Fleming does the interview and speaks with Natalie Dessay, and she talks a little bit about her interpretation. A really lovely mad scene rehearsal clip where you can see how the soprano, in this case Pretty Yende, is working together with the maestro and the player of the glass harmonica, and how they're coming together to create the mad scene, which on its face seems like a solo scene, but it's not. It's really a trio between the maestro, the orchestra, the soprano, and the player of the glass harmonica, and you can feel how they work together as a team. This Royal Opera Insight clip is about an hour, but it's great if you have a sub that day. It's an hour-long lecture about Lucia, and they do some beautiful things. Finally, The Bride of Lammermore, the whole text is available for free. This is an audiobook version of it, of the whole thing on YouTube, and the lady that reads it has a beautiful Scottish accent, so it's exotic for the kids to listen to. Here are some of my other sources. Gutenberg.org has the entire text of The Bride of Lammermore. And then there's some of the other links that I have there. Special thanks to Ken Howard for all those beautiful photos. I love this opera. My students love this opera. And I hope so deeply that you will be able to use some of this in your own classroom and can find some empathy and some great discussions with them using Lucia as a vehicle.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emily Sáenz. Dr. Sáenz, is it true that the presentations that you have shared with us today, will they be available in the Google Classroom? Is that going to happen?
Yes. They will all be there by this afternoon. They are ready for you, so feel free.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that beautiful work and for those lovely presentations.